Just a short time ago, Senator Markwayne Mullin wrapped up his confirmation hearing, which was often contentious, sometimes accusatory. There were numerous questions about how ICE would operate under his leadership compared to his controversial and ousted DHS Secretary Kristi Noem.
What Secretary Noem did was give the green light to lawless behavior. Are you going to give the green light to lawless behavior?
I will operate within the parameters and the policies and the laws that you guys set for me.
And the Constitution of the United States.
Of course, the Constitution
of the Fourth Amendment, among other things.
Of course, the Constitution of the United States. I'll swear to uphold that when I get sworn in. But be very clear, I don't get to choose the laws that I enforce. You guys pass the laws. I enforce those laws.
Right.
And the reason why we haven't had...
Shooting a protester who was exercising his First Amendment speech and carrying a lawfully licensed gun is not a lawful behavior.
Joining me now is Alan Orr, immigration attorney and past president of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. I wonder if what you heard from Mullin gives you any indication about how he will direct ICE, and will it be in any way importantly different from what Kristi Noem did?
Right. So what's insightful for me about the position in general, forget about who we're saying should be secretary, is that his resume doesn't meet the qualifications for the position. He's not trained in law. He's not trained in national security. And so in that answer, his illicit question was, are you going to follow the law? And his answer could not be more broad or on the street of a common person saying, of course I will. But that's not the nuance that exists right now in Homeland Security. They are not following the law. And that's why many of these cases are in federal court and national courts trying to resolve this issue of, can you do this sort of warrantless arrest? So he doesn't have the sophistication knowledge. I'm sure he's a nice person, but likability should not be the qualification for one of the most important cabinet positions in the United States.
So let me play what Mullin actually said, specifically about DHS officers entering homes when they did not have a judicial warrant. Take a listen.
We will not enter a home or a place of business without a judicial warrant, unless we're pursuing the individual that runs into a place of business or a resident or a house.
What did you make of that?
I think that's a broad statement for him to say, but that doesn't make it a policy. I mean, that's actually the law right now, and they're not following it. So his intentions are great, but how is he going to implement that? We see a lower of a standard of the people that they're hiring in ICE, lowering the age limit, or changing the age limits, and sort of allowing this lawlessness to sort of happen. And that's why we can say we have seen a change in some of this on-the-ground movement since Tom Homan has come in. So is he just going to toe the line where Tom Homan is right now, or is he going to do something else? That's my main issue here. He doesn't have the vision for the Department of Homeland Security with regards to immigration or anything else. We are so focused on immigration right now and protecting the homeland that we are now the eagle who has eggs in the nest, protecting it from the snake, but forgetting about all the other birds that are coming to eat the eggs while we're wasting our time fighting and killing the snake. We have to be able to cover everything. And right now, what happened in this hearing was not a covering of the fraud, not a covering of the cybersecurity, not a covering of the crimes, not a covering of the drugs brought in by United States citizens, and much less any of the other policies and issues that the Department of Homeland has covered since 2003.
You know, one of the things he said is his goal was to get the DHS essentially out of the headlines. And of course, there were no bigger or more disturbing headlines than about Alex Preddy and Renee Good, two American citizens who were killed at the hands of ICE agents in Minneapolis. He did retract his statement on Alex Preddy, who he basically said he, went there to cause trouble. But there wasn't an apology either. And there were also questions about his own behavior with regards to the chairman, which Rand Paul said called into question what message it sends to ICE agents about using violence. And I wonder, as you look at that as a whole, and the concern the American people have about the way ICE agents have gone about their jobs, do you have any sense, even given understanding that he doesn't have the resume that past DHS chiefs have had, that he would indeed do anything differently?
I don't think he would do anything differently, because we do still have concerns about the policymakers in the White House and who really is driving these issues. I mean, we saw a letter signed by Tom Homan saying he was the border czar yesterday, making concessions on the Hill. So there are some concerns about that. But regards to his personality, he didn't make any concessions. As an officer of a court, when I'm in someone's judicial proceedings and they're the judge, I need to defer to them. There was no deferment in this hearing to the committee. He didn't have to honestly or earnestly do anything other than just sort of defer in his personality. And he chose not to do that. He still had a stance. And even when he read his opening remark, he said, let me get this off of my chest first. That's not the type of person that I would want leading any type of security for any type of individuals, because he said he could fly off the handle. He'll apologize for it later. That's not what I need in this chief position.
Eleanor, always great to hear your side and to have you on the program. Thank you so much.